Adrian N. Breitfelder, City Clerk, you are hereby directed to call a special session of the City Council to be held on Monday, July 1st, 2024 at 5:30 p.m. in the historic Federal Building for the purpose of conducting a work session on Central Avenue and White Street Corridor traffic study.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to a special session of the Dubuque City Council for July 1st, 2024. As a reminder to viewers and listeners, due to the nature of tonight's meeting topic, public input is not accepted. However, you may contact the City Council directly from the city's webpage at www.cityofdubuque.org/council-contacts. Attendance for the session is as follows. Mayor Kavanaugh.
Here.
Council members Farber.
Here.
Jones.
Here.
Resnick.
Here.
Roussel. Sprank.
Here.
Wethel. I do not see City Manager Van Milligan on virtually. I'm just going to pause to confirm. Okay, and City Attorney Brumwell.
Here.
Thank you. Our work session topic is the Central Avenue and White Street Corridor traffic study. I will turn it over to Traffic Engineer Justine Hull.
Good afternoon, good evening, good night. City Mayor and City Council members, I am Traffic Engineer Justine Hull. I am here to present our consultant and project partner, Bolton & Mink, Jennifer McCoy, Senior Traffic Engineer, and Andrew Dresner, Senior Urban Planner, to give a presentation and update on our Central Avenue and White Street Corridor traffic study.
Hello, good evening. Thank you for having us both. Good to be here. Okay, we have, I believe, an hour with you. We will endeavor to speak for 30 minutes or so and open up for some questions and discussions. And this is basically our agenda, to share with you the study information, some of the study elements, what we've learned so far, how some of the pieces fit together, and then next steps. This is the first, by the way, of 2 or 3 sessions we'll have with you. So you're not here to make decisions. You're here, at this stage of the game. You're here to get up to speed with us and the community on this important project. Okay, just a little bit of grounding. First of all, let me put my keys out here so I don't fidget with them. First of all, project location. So this is Central and White. It's about 36 study intersections going from 3rd or 4th on the south up to, I think it's 22nd on the north. Okay, just get your bearings. A couple things to point out also about this image here is the appearance that the city is a sort of a north-south oriented city. You might think it is from the drawing on the right because that's the way the city was originally laid out. But as the city's grown over the years, it's jumped the bluff and it's really become an east-west city. And that's particularly important because as the city's changed over the multiple decades, of the economy has changed, the orientation to the river has changed. So it's gone from a working river to a recreational river and a natural asset river. And that's, you might think, why are we talking about that? This is a traffic study about 2 roads. That's actually really an important point that will to keep in your mind, and it'll come up throughout this whole project, the gradual reorientation of the city to the river. There's also a bit of a misnomer that we're calling this a traffic study. There will be a lot of information, a lot of data related to traffic. But in many ways, this is more than a traffic study. It's really a putting together the city in a different way type of study. It is about becoming a city of choice to live here, choice to do business here. So I would like us all to keep that in mind as well as we talk about traffic. Okay, this is a great photograph, I think, that we took that illustrates a lot of the issues on Central and White Street. So we have a couple young women who work at a daycare going about their job, which is to take kids out on a nice spring day or early spring day on their route to get some fresh air. And part of that is crossing, would be White Street, I think. And you can see that they have to do so, the only way for them to do it safely is to have their own flag to get across the street safely. You can also see in the distance a couple trucks passing by. So this picture really captures a lot of what it's like to be on Central and White now, not just for the kids, not just for the workers, but also for the freight drivers and the truckers. And this is not a project, and we don't look at it as a project of banging different interests against each other. This is a space in a constrained city that has to be shared by everyone in a way that's safe and productive for everyone. So this is the way in which we look at this project. Yes, it's about 2 streets, but really we see it as, we take a holistic approach, looking at it in terms of safety, community, placemaking, economy, and mobility. And that's sort of the broad lens that we will bring to this project. So I said earlier, it's tempting to think of this as 2 roads going north and south, as maybe illustrated on this drawing, the original plat of the city. In reality, this is a project about 2 roads going through your downtown. And your downtown is a series of different districts, the Millwork District, Main Street, Central Avenue. And it's a downtown with a series of different destinations, be they parks, be they City Hall, be they businesses, offices, or even just homes. And in reality, the traffic pattern that we're looking at looks actually more like this than it does like this. Just in reality, it looks a lot more like this. So that's the way that's sort of the environment we have to solve here. We're in the business of changing public the public realm in such a way that it works better for the city. So again, bringing back that picture and bringing back the sort of 2 movement uses of Central and White. Yes, there is through traffic. There are people who start on the bottom and continue way off to the top and vice versa. But there are also people who cross it and use it for short lengths of use. So that's the sort of context that we're working within. And because of that, we go further and we can think of this whole study area as a series of blocks, not just 2 streets, but as a series of blocks. And we can design this place so that the experience is different as you go from block to block or as you go from district to district. And you'll find, what we're finding out also is that these cross streets become very important in the overall solution to this problem. So really what we have here is a Central Avenue and a White Street that acts as a zipper, not a divider, acts as a zipper that pulls together the different parts of downtown. And that's kind of the overall context that we look at this project. So I'm going to pass it over to Jennifer, and it's going to come back to me in a little bit.
Thanks, Andrew. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the study elements. We have kind of these 2 tracks kind of going in unison together. One is the technical track, and the second is the community engagement track. So for the community engagement, so far we've had an online comment map, we've held a series of stakeholder meetings, we've done door knocking to both the businesses and the residents along the corridor, we've held a series of focus groups, and we have conducted a round of pop-ups, and we are here in our first work session. And then we will also be having an open house as we move forward later in the project. We'll be doing more pop-ups next week, and along with the survey and the video, and eventually end up here at a public hearing. While all that community engagement is going on, we have kind of all the technical engineering stuff kind of going on behind the scenes. So we have a stakeholder group, we have a project management team that consists of several city staff members, but also a couple members of the community. We have Greater Dubuque and also Prairie Farms represented on that project management team as well. Looking into the analysis piece, what is the state of these roads as they sit? What are the problem areas, in addition to what we're hearing from the community? What are we seeing from the crash data? What are we seeing from the speed data? What are we seeing from the traffic counts? Kind of the stuff that will feed into more of the analysis side of things, and eventually get to evaluating some different options and alternatives for these corridors. Because I think the main thing we really want to understand is, if we make changes to Central and White, because that's what we're hearing, based upon what we're hearing from the community and the engagement, what does that mean? What does that mean to travel times on the corridor? What does that mean to safety? How does that mean for these different modes? And so we want to be able to give you kind of that data so you can make those data-driven decisions as well, in addition to what you're hearing from the public. So our study is actually kind of comprised into 4 different areas. Right now we are in the analyze section, so we're kind of exploring what we're hearing from the public, looking at that data. As I mentioned, we'll have some public events and a community survey. As we move a little bit further into late summer, early fall, we're going to talk about the different alternatives, start evaluating some of those different things. So we've heard all of these things. What does that mean to changes? And then again, if we change the roadway, what does that mean to those different things we talked about, like travel time and safety and mobility? And then in October and December, the latter part of the year, is when we'll be coming back with some of those final recommendations with an open house and ultimately a public hearing. So hoping to wrap everything up by the end of this year. Just wanted to kind of highlight that, we are not starting over. This effort is rooted in past planning efforts. Anything from the spring fling event, the work that was done as part of the Central Avenue Streetscapes Plan. We know this was identified, Central revitalization was identified as a council high priority. There's been talk of these streets in the Dubuque Regional Bike Ped Plan, Imagine Dubuque, Move Dubuque, and also the Historic Millworks Plan, and then of course the Streets Plan, Central Avenue Streetscape. All of these planning efforts, and these are just a portion of them, are feeding into this effort. So we are not starting over, but we are just building upon what's already been done. So as part of this, we worked with our PMT to develop kind of a vision and guiding principles for this project. So the vision statement that we came up with working with that group was that Central Avenue and White Streets will become a valued and vibrant place in downtown Dubuque, a place for businesses to thrive, people to live, and for the unique identity of the city to shine. And we need to keep in mind the guiding principles of safety, economic development, connectivity, and equity. I did send a handout ahead of time that kind of dove into these things in detail as well. So I talked a little bit about stakeholder input. We kind of have 5, guiding groups that we're working with in addition to just the broader public. The one is the project management team, which I mentioned is more city staff related. And then we have a project advisory team, which is where you have your Imagine Dubuque, your Dubuque, Maine, all of and we have freight on that group and residents representation on that group. We have Key City Creative, kind of all of those members kind of coming around to really kind of help vet or guide things before they go out to the smaller focus groups or even out to the public. And then we do have a freight group, a small business group, and a residence group. And I believe I sent some information that kind of gave you an idea of who's on those different committees as well. And this just touches on some of those different members of those focus groups. As you can see, we really tried to get a nice broad range of groups and representation of those groups, whether it's businesses on the corridor, residents on the corridor, your kind of big organizations, the Dubuque Initiatives, Dubuque, Maine, Dubuque Forward, the Chamber, a lot of the trucking and freight companies that utilize these corridors as well. And we did go out and do door knocking and door to door, spent several hours engaging with residents and businesses along the corridor. And in addition to showing at the Prescott Elementary Carnival, the Farmers Market, City Life, and also the downtown neighborhood groups. And you can see here just kind of some of those different numbers and hours of engaging. I wanted to touch a little bit about some of the themes we're hearing from these groups so far. So when we talk about what we heard from the residents, a lot of it was how to make these corridors more welcoming, adding things like public art or green spaces, maybe having more family-friendly spaces. Outdoor dining, outdoor seating came up a lot, enhanced lighting, addressing high speeds on the corridor, lowering noise levels, and more investment in the neighborhood. That was something we heard in both the resident group and also in the business group, is how do we get reinvestment in the buildings and how do we address buildings that are maybe not in the best of condition. Again, those businesses would love to see a corridor that's more welcoming with public art and green spaces. They too said outdoor seating, streetscape. Another thing that came up with the businesses was kind of building upon the police presence that's in downtown, addressing things like littering and maybe even a perception of crime was really what was talked about most, and adding lighting and things like that. And I mentioned our online comment map. This actually closed a couple weeks ago, but this was a really great way when we were out doing our door knocking. We invited people to participate online. There was a link to this through the city's project website. We were able to gather comments, and then people were able to reply to people's comments or even thumbs up and thumbs down. Different comments. It kind of works as an online kind of open house, kind of that public discussion and format. So now I'm going to dig a little bit into some of the technical pieces. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the information we found on pedestrian crossings. This was really interesting, is that these two streets, the area is used significantly by pedestrians. So for example, on Central you have 8,000 vehicles a day, and on White you have 6,000 vehicles a day. But our traffic count showed that there are 6,000 pedestrians daily utilizing Central and over 3,000 daily on White. So that goes to show that these are very significant uses. The map on the right shows that the bigger the dot, the higher kind of the activity area. So you do have a very large amount of pedestrians walking both along these corridors and crossing these corridors. The other thing we found when we dug into the crash data is that speeding is a significant concern. Not only is it something we heard from the public, it's actually resulting in crashes on the corridor. And interesting enough, one quarter or 25% of your injury-related crashes are speed-related. The one fatality that occurred on this corridor was also speed-related. So of your 547 crashes, 25% of them are related to, your injury-related crashes are related to speeding. The other thing that was interesting that we found, I wanted to mention, is that although the quantity is low, the number of pedestrian crashes that we've had, that's experienced on the corridor is low, they are all resulting in some type of injury. So when you are in a vehicle-only crash, you have, on these corridors, you have a 27% likelihood of being injured. If you are a pedestrian or a bicycle, you have a 100% likelihood of injury based upon the crash data. So although the number is low, when they do occur, they are always resulting in injury. Parking is something that came up as well, and so we wanted to take a look, kind of building upon the work that was done as part of your Move Dubuque and your smart parking mobility study. It showed that parking is underutilized. However, it is still a very valuable item, especially in certain places. And there are areas you can see where the blocks show up in red that have a little bit higher usage. But for the most part, we have about 500 parking spaces on these two streets, and they're about 24% utilized. So that shows us is that there's some opportunity maybe to utilize some of that parking in a different way, area dependent. And it's been really great. We spent a lot of time talking to the freight community and really got a good understanding about what are their critical corridors, right? Not every street is a critical corridor, and not every corner is a turn that they use, quite often. So we really got to understand that, yes, there's a few key corridors, ways they basically get on and off the freeway, and turning are the most important to them. So while you think about that, it's the trucks are not a high percentage of vehicles. I mentioned earlier that Central has 8,000 vehicles a day. The trucks are 6 to 7% of that daily traffic, so about 500 vehicles a day. So not a large percentage, but they are different. They have different needs. Obviously, turning, they have wider radius, they need different accommodations. And it's also interesting that the volumes are much higher in the AM peak than the PM peak. So that trucking activity gets busy in the morning because people are loading up, they're going to other states and things like that, and tend to drop off as they get further into the day. And, they talk about 4th, 9th, and 11th being their most kind of important, but the bridge on at 14th Street will likely change those travel patterns. So let's talk a little bit about volume and operations. So I think one important thing to note is when we look at traffic capacity to try and say how bad are things, we look at a grading system. We call it level of service. It's graded between A and F. Kind of like school, F is bad, A is good. So as you can see here, I guess the goal from traffic engineering standpoint is level of service C. or better. Some in urban areas, you would accept perhaps level service D, maybe even into level service E. But as you can see, everything is level service A to level of service C. So what this shows us is that things are operating well today. It also shows us that there may be opportunity to look at these roads a little bit different way. Maybe they go from one-way to two-way. Maybe they go from a two-lane one-way street to a one-lane one-way street in certain areas. You know, there's capacity there because it's showing us that things are not breaking down today, because those intersections do operate with little delay in the AM and PM peaks. And I think an interesting point to note is that if you are free-flowing at 30 miles an hour or you are free-flowing at 20 miles an hour, it's still level of service A, because that level of service is based on delay. And so you could free-flow at a slower speed and still have good level of service. So that's something to kind of keep in mind as we move forward. And now I'm going to hand it back to Andrew to talk about putting it all together.
Thank you. Okay, Jennifer talked a little bit about freight traffic, and we had a lot of discussion with many of the freight drivers and operators, and we learned a tremendous amount where they're going and where they're coming from. Essentially, what you see on this map here are the primary freight routes. So yes, Central and White are used, often the full length of them, but 9th and 11th are also frequently used in order to get to and from the highway. So these are sort of the existing freight patterns. We know, and you all know, that there are two important projects that you have in the future. One is a new bridge at 14th Street, which is right about here, that will cross over the red line, which is the railroad tracks, which, by the way, we understand we're not going to have fewer trains in the future, we're going to have more trains in the future. And where that's important is that when you don't have a bridge, you have potential blockage or stop, right? And you see that right now, and we'll see that in the future down here at 9th and 11th Street. So this bridge will alleviate that problem. It'll be a bridge that will connect from 14th, down to 16th through a curve. And that's important because it will give freight traffic the opportunity to access the highway without concern of being stopped by trains. So what we foresee happening is all the roadways in this southern area here that are shown with dotted lines to be, in a sense, loosened up or freed up. Uh-oh, did I touch something? Did it go down? There we go. Nope. We're good. Okay. We anticipate in the future these streets that are indicated in dotted lines to be freed up or loosened up from the freight traffic in the future, simply because truckers will find a more reliable, better, easier way to get to where they want to go without adding any mileage or time. In fact, it might reduce time. It'll increase reliability and it'll reduce time. Not only that, it'll create less braking for them, which is very expensive because brakes wear out, all that sort of thing. The other important project that we understand is to be happening is this small little other pink link, which is right here. We'll call that Pine Street. That will, in some ways, do the same thing. It will pull freight traffic out of the dotted areas and allow freight traffic to access the port in more direct ways. So these are two really, really important projects, and the message here is stick with them. Stick with them. They're not easy. They can be complicated. I don't think they're all fully funded, but they're really important to lay the foundation for improving Central and White streets. Okay. So if you think about it, and we stay at this frame, what that does is it'll, over time, allows downtown to be a series of more coherent districts in which Central and White streets play an important role, not because they're just north-south streets, but because they're a series of 36 or so blocks with 4 sides that zipper together the full downtown. So what does all of this mean? Couple important takeaways. We believe there is adequate roadway capacity today and therefore it provides the opportunities for improvements. In other words, we can explore reducing lanes, we can explore maybe increasing parking, increasing green space without, as Jennifer mentioned, total system breakdown. We're confident about that. However, at the same time, you're an older city. You're not tearing down buildings to widen streets and add parks. So you're in a constrained right-of-way, and there likely will be some potential trade-offs. However, we always want to keep in mind, and when think about those trade-offs, what kind of city you want to be, and you want to be a city of choice. We believe we can reduce truck impacts on the corridor without impacting mileage or access, if you stick with those projects I was just talking about. Connections to and across the corridor are as important as connections along its full length. And that speaks to sort of that city's overall reorientation to an east-west type city where people are moving from district to district, not necessarily from hinterland to hinterland or north to south. Also, the character of Central and White can vary along its length. We don't need to think of it just as sort of a monolithic experience. And in fact, it should vary along its length, responding to its context. And in fact, the character of Central can be different from the character of White. All of that will go into the design thinking. The side streets, we believe, will provide an opportunity to support the corridor. We can use the side streets to think about places for more parking, more green space. Maybe those have bike parking. Maybe there's plaza space. So again, that they play an important role in this whole piece. And again, just thinking of this all as a 22-block zipper that pulls together the different districts of downtown. So, moving forward, our team's going to move into our design process where we're evaluating different approaches, staying two-way, staying one-way, switching parts to two-way. Maybe the whole thing goes two-way, reducing lanes, expanding lanes. All those sort of iterations will come in. Considering where we can have wider sidewalks, where lane reductions make sense, all those sort of items. And we'll be evaluating all of the design alternatives based on the elements on the right-hand side. Operations, how do we serve vehicles? How do we improve the environment for pedestrians? How do we improve it for bikes? What kind of streetscaping additions can we add? What are the on-street parking opportunities, and how would we improve safety? So those become the evaluations that the evaluation measures that we're going to look at when we come up with different design alternatives. And I don't know why that popped up. It doesn't matter. So next steps, we have further engagement throughout the summer. We have some parts of the technical analysis to complete. We'll be developing the cross sections and the roadway alternatives that I just alluded to. And then in early September, we'll come back to you with those alternatives and that evaluation. Okay. Anything else, Jennifer, that I
think that's it. So
yeah, so that's what we have, and we're available for questions and discussion.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you both for the presentation. This is very useful information. I'm guessing we will have some discussion and questions for you, so we'll go ahead and get that started. Eric, would you mind keep taking the live feed off of our feed up here, please, at the desk, so we don't see ourselves talking? Thank you very much. All right. Well, now I had two at the same time, so yeah. Ms. Russell, go ahead.
Thank you. I really like the concept of the zipper. That's really gives it a whole different approach. And there was one comment you made a couple times about the upcoming community engagement, and you talked about open house. What does that mean? Where is it, or is it virtual, or?
Sure. So next week, we plan to have we're doing a little bit non-traditional approach to the first open house. We're doing a pop-up open house. And so we will be at the farmer's market on Saturday, and we're trying to secure a second location. So that would not be this Saturday, but Saturday the 13th. We were there back in May, so we'll be popping up again. We're trying to secure a second location for Thursday evening as well on the 11th. But all that information will be on the city's project website, so people can get information there. After that, we will also be launching a survey. So if you can't make it to these pop-up open houses, you'll be able to engage and see the same information through a survey that, again, will be public. And we'll also be putting information out through social media and signage and things like that to get people to that survey as well. So then in the fall, we will have a more traditional open house where we have it at one location and people are invited to attend. So that's kind of what we have planned.
Wonderful, thank you.
Mr. Resnick.
Thank you very much. So Dubuque has become more of an east-west city, but there are some north-south needs. And right now, this is a very important, it is the north-south way to get around. And so, of course, we still need to have a good way for cars to get through. And you mentioned that, and there's some trucks, of course. So you mentioned that we could reduce speeds without reducing congestion. And right now, these streets have timed lights, which really, those timed lights, they are what determines what the speed is. So when I go home, to get through these timed lights, I'm at the speed limit. In order to get past the last one on Laura Street, I have to go a little bit faster than the speed limit, but they're all timed to be that way. Are you saying for this that we could use, a lot of our speeding could be taken care of on the streets by timing the lights correctly? I know that's it inhibits other things east-west, so I know I'm not criticizing. I love the time lights here in Dubuque, but they do determine how fast people are going to go. They want to get through the lights. So you're saying that we could maybe reduce those, we can reduce the speed and keep it flowing by retiming our lights. Is that what you're saying? Would you agree with that?
Well, you are correct that the lights are timed for the existing speed limit. So yes, you could potentially retime the lights, but I think what we're trying to think about is also combining that with other design elements as well, so that way people feel like they want to drive slower. And maybe one of the things we look at is you don't flow through the corridor in a minute and 30 seconds. I don't know what the exact travel time is from end to end. Maybe we accept a little bit more delay and we flow through it in 2 minutes. And we stop at a few more lights and things like that as well. And so that's going to be something we're looking at because we want to make sure that council understands what those trade-offs are as well. So obviously one of the things would be looking at a retiming of the lights under these new configurations, but also maybe accepting that you don't flow the entire space, but you stop a few more times along the corridor in order to accomplish some of these other goals.
We have sustainability as one of our priorities, and the good thing about keeping moving, you've always mentioned, is that, first of all, people are going to want to keep moving, and sustainability says, well, let's just keep it at a crawl, let's keep traffic going. So I'm hoping that we can make these adjustments. Why it's not simple, because I know how hard it is to do these timing things because of all that cross traffic. Maybe they're going to have to wait a little bit. That'll all be determined by others. But I think a lot, instead of putting controls and say we're going to have a lot of enforcement or ticket cameras or some other things, this type of thing can be. We can use these timing for safety purpose. It happens all along Dodge too. People rush to that first light, but then you know what? There's no reason to speed because the lights are all timed, and people appreciate that, and it cuts down on a lot of things. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. I did look at number 27 of 32, where you cut down the amount of truck traffic through Dubuque, through downtown, at least the southern portion. Looks pretty good. Those have to be, the parts, the turning sections there, as you know, are going to have to be heavy duty, and we're going to have to maybe clear things out, and you'll look at all that. But those are going to be heavily used spaces. And so anyway, that's what I'm hoping, that we can keep it on one time through. For sustainability and for realistic issues. Some people do want to just get north to south. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Farber, go ahead.
And just to follow up to that, I recall we had some conversation with some of the truckers at a previous city council meeting, and I was very pleased to see that freight had its own stakeholder input, which I think is extremely important. At the time, we were discussing rerouting trucks from Central and White due to things that were happening in terms of construction and what was the best way to get them to Highway 20, actually. And one of the concerns expressed was how cost competitive these truckers, these commercial businesses could be operating under, what were the challenges from that. And I was just wondering, as you're talking, and I'm sure we'll learn more later on this data point, but has that come to the attention of in these conversations as to will they remain cost competitive if the trucking pattern changes? So that's one question. And then they also commented that they are not responsible for a lot of the accidents on Central and White, and that indeed they track every driver and every truck, and that they're very conscious, if you will, about the professionalism of their drivers. So, that might be something to, if you're talking about that as well. But I would be quite interested to know about the business competitiveness and what those freight companies are sharing with you so that they do maintain and retain competitiveness here in Dubuque and don't look to go elsewhere based on the fact that their trucks can't get in and out easily.
Sure. Well, I'll address the first part, and then I know Andrew did a little kind of analysis with the 14th Street kind of. So yes, they shared, those that had done like reporting and impacts shared that with us. So we have those detailed reports, and it was really good. We went around the table and they all talked about like how they use the Northwest Arterial today, how they go east and south and those types of things, and how they move through. So we could really get a good understanding of that. And I think we do kind of recognize that Northwest Arterial works for some trips, but it doesn't work if you're just trying to head east and south. But if you look at this 14th Street connection, and I'll have, I know Andrew did a little bit of kind of just number crunching, it's not really out of the way because and we actually even kind of vetted this, and we're going to talk with them more next week, the bigger group, but with some of the companies, like, what do you think of this idea? And they love the fact that they won't hit a train, right? They're not going to have to wait for a train, so it's more reliable. So that's a big piece because they talk about its mileage and time, as you know, is what they talk about. So do you want to talk a little bit about that 14th Street?
Sure. You should go back to this drawing. It is mileage and time that's on their mind, but there are a lot, some of the things that I think are important that are on their mind. Safety is on their mind. We did learn they're actually the professional ones out there. They're the ones who are trained, The rest of us aren't trained, or we got our license a long time ago and whatever. So stress is on their mind. They don't want a stressful environment. They know what they're doing with their big trucks, and they know they have to be extremely careful. Starting and stopping is not something they like, even though it might be a straight line. That's hard on the trucks. So therefore it's expensive on the trucks. That's where the noise comes from. So that's tough on the neighborhood. Turns are an interesting thing for them. They need a wide berth to make their turns. So they would be happy if you can give them clearer turns and easier access to the highway. They'd be more than happy to add a couple thousand feet to their trip that might be hundreds of miles long. So we learned a lot talking to them, which was really, really, really interesting. The choice here to take 14th as opposed to going straight down to 3rd and 4th, it might add a couple thousand feet to their trip. I mean, it is negligible to them. In exchange for not having to wait at a train, in exchange for a more less stressful drive, I mean, these are no-brainers for them. In exchange for turns that are designed for them, rather than being held up at turns because they're too tight or whatever, those are easy exchanges for them for the couple thousand feet that they might have to do. So it was learned a ton talking to the fellas.
And will they be having further conversation with you about any decision that you make to share with us as part of the study and perhaps the potential changes
Yes.
for them. Okay, I think it's great that we're having that discussion, and hopefully they will be your newest best partner in this.
And the other thing that was very interesting is, you'll get a different dispatch is looking at one thing, drivers are experiencing something different. So we also learned a little bit of that, which was really interesting.
Good. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Wethel?
Yeah. I think the summary I, in my head, put together is keep moving but don't speed. And creating an atmosphere of that goal, to me, creates the best for everyone. It'd be great if you guys could just hand us that on a platter. That would be wonderful. A couple questions I had about your presentation. You mentioned at one point that you described the parking on one side, and I think you were speaking of a two-way? Is that right, when you were speaking about moving parking to only one side of the road, or were you speaking about on a one-way?
Oh, it could be either.
Okay,
Those
okay.
are all up for discussion right now.
And my thought was, as you described that, do you do that? I don't know. In my head, I kind of thought, well, is that so you can create diagonal parking? But diagonal parking to me sounds like it would potentially slow traffic flow. And I don't know. Do you have a comment about that?
Well, comment about the viability of diagonal, or?
Yeah, I guess when you talk about shifting parking to only one side of a road, that takes away some parking. So I would want it to be worth something valuable.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the, just as it relates to parking, immediate parking is really important for businesses. Really important for businesses. Businesses don't line the full 22 blocks of both of these streets. The utilization is low, in part because businesses that aren't all turnover customer serving type businesses. So it's all on the table right now. Diagonal parking is certainly a possibility. It does not reduce pavement. It actually adds pavement. You get, 30% more parking spaces, something like that. You don't double your parking spaces. But we could even explore back-end diagonal parking as a possibility. I don't think you have it in town here, and you just went, uh-oh. It's fairly common in a lot of cities. It's far more intuitive than straight-in diagonal parking. It takes a little bit of education, but that's on the table as well. Even eliminating parking on one or both sides might be on the table. On certain blocks where you have housing, but that housing has parking behind it already, maybe that housing would prefer to have green space in front of it and not on-street parking. So it's really a lot is on the table to decide.
I do want to share with you my concern about parking as it relates to the businesses. So you had mentioned that we don't have businesses lining the 22 blocks, but I sure hope eventually we do. That's the goal, is to create a vibrant neighborhood down here. So just as a thought that I want to put forward, I had a phone call from a business owner on Central this week about one parking spot that had changed. These parking spots are really valuable to them. And so I just want to reiterate how important that is, and how I know getting feedback will bring some of that to the surface. But it's such an important piece of doing business for quick in and out that I do want to make sure we respect that moving forward.
I agree with you. It is very important.
So right now, we're looking at a variety of different options, but the plan is to get down to 3 alternatives, which we'll bring back to council. And with that, we will do an analysis down to what does it look like on each block if we make changes here. And, if the spaces are 20% full and we take away, half of them, now they're 40 or 50% full. And just so you can really understand with the impact with each alternative and down to the block each business owner can understand as well. So that is a piece of what we'll bring back to you. So,
Thank you both.
yep.
Yeah, Mr. Spring.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you guys for the lovely presentation. The key takeaways I'm definitely taking away from this is what the citizens said: more investment in the neighborhood, more welcoming green spaces, added lighting, outdoor seating, and of course, lower noise levels from all traffic. The one thing that we also haven't forgotten about, there are 9,000 people that walk in this neighborhood compared to 14,000 vehicles. So that says something that I think we want to remember our citizens that probably didn't come to your surveys, that probably just didn't know how to get a hold of you. And this is how they get around in the neighborhood, is by literally walking these streets. So I think I want to remember our neighbors that are walking. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jones, anything?
Just a little intrigued by the diagonal parking suggestion. I hope that doesn't happen, especially back in, because Dubuquers aren't going to be good at it, although I like that better than head in, because that means you're backing out into traffic, which is a terrible combination. It works really well on 2nd Street, where there's adjacent to the Hotel Julian, where there's no traffic, and it's a nice wide street. But I would hope that's low on your list of choices, because you're making the engineers squirm when we even talk about it back there. You should be watching them. It's pretty amazing. I love the concepts that you're throwing out here. I love the thought of think of it as a zipper instead of a corridor. That's intriguing and important. And I'm really glad to see that the 14th Street overpass, which is now going to happen, is incorporated in your thoughts, and what a difference it appears to make. That's all good stuff. So I'll just say good work. It's looking good so far, and keep it coming.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Jones, and thank you, everybody. Yeah, this is a very helpful discussion. I mean, I think we've really been looking forward to getting to this point where we can have more of a thorough discussion about what is actually going on Central and White. I want to begin with a really important statement. We are not done talking. I'm saying that to anybody who's watching, anybody who might be reporting to the folks who are going to be watching. We are not done talking. This is sort of the middle of the conversation. So any suggestions that are made are not the automatic things that are going to be happening here. I think that's always important to say, because I do think that we're at a point in Dubuque where we're going through a lot of changes. And it's hard to go through a lot of change all at once. It's just, we're talking about new overpasses. We're talking about changing streets potentially from two-way to one-way. That's come up multiple times. We're talking about changing truck traffic and doing all these things. And then we're talking about other parts of town where all this is happening. And it's hard to do all those changes at once. I just hope everybody can keep in mind that this does take time, and for the right reasons. I think the fact that you've had the chance to gather so much information is really useful, and you're going to gather more. And then you're going to come back and talk to us more, and then we're going to come back and make some actual decisions eventually on how to do this. So I appreciate the fact that we're doing this, and I hope that we actually keep all ideas on the table for now until we can really say that that's not a good idea. We really, sort of back away from it. I appreciated Mr. Sprank's summary because that's kind of what I was pulling from. It's important, I think, to think about the big picture here, that we really are hearing we want more investment in the neighborhood. We want it to be welcoming for both people who live there and businesses and pedestrians and drivers alike. I want it to be a welcoming place. People don't feel that way now from the sound of it. And then better for pedestrians in general, people who are going to be walking there, living there, working there. And shopping there or going to different businesses there. I want to stick with safety here just to close this out. I think one of my biggest concerns as I listen to your presentation is two things. One, we have some pretty good crash data here from 5 years, and it's pretty alarming, actually. And I feel the same level of alarm that I did when we were talking about speed cameras a few months ago. The fact that people are moving too fast. And it's causing accidents to the point of a fatality with a pedestrian, and to the point of 327 crashes at intersections. And, while, Ms. Farber mentioned it wasn't always the trucks, 41 of those were trucks. It was, I think those numbers are important that we think about this. And I would hope that as we go forward, the safety of people in our community is our top priority. Whatever we're going to do, we need to make sure that we're safe doing it. So if we're going to drive there, we should drive in a way that is going to be safer for everybody. If that means slower, it means slower. If it means more stops, then maybe that's a trade-off for some of the sustainability factors that we do talk about frequently here. I think we should always shoot to be a city with 0 traffic fatalities and as few traffic accidents as we can possibly have. So I would hope that that's something that we continue to focus on as we go forward. And I also hope that we're talking, as we are talking about this, that we're thinking about this from an enforcement standpoint. We've tried the speed camera situation. We have now been stopped by the state of Iowa. That I continue to be frustrated by that, but that's not going to change. I don't see that changing for the next year, maybe 2 years. So what I hope that we can focus on is ways to continue to help our police department find the proper enforcement mechanisms here as one aspect of this, along with all the other things we can design this around. So I hope that we can continue to make that a part of the conversation. And I know that we're trying. I know we are. That brings me to the crime piece. It doesn't sound like you actually have done a whole lot of work with data on actual crime statistics in this area. Is that accurate?
No, we haven't.
Okay, yeah, and that won't be a part of your study, right? Okay, so I'm kind of not talking to you directly when I say this, but I'm talking to all of us in general. There's a major perception that crime is very high in this area. I would like to know if it is. I'd like to know if that's true. Do we have good data that shows us that crime is higher in this area of town than other parts? And if so, what is that? What crimes are those, and what does crime look like in this neighborhood, so we can focus on that as a part of this larger discussion. It's not a part of what you're doing, and I can appreciate that, but I do think it's an important thing that I heard here, that there's definitely a perception, and I want to know the accuracy of that perception, because if it is accurate, we definitely have to deal with that. And if it's not accurate, then we have to deal with it in a different way. We need to talk about this area of town in a way that is, I guess, centered on fact than anything else. So I would hope that we could work on those things. I'm sorry, I just talked at you a bunch. I don't think I have many more questions for you. I just, these are the things I'm thinking about as we go through this. Do you have anything else to add? We have a few more minutes, or anything else?
Just building a little bit upon the crime thing is that perception thing. We heard it from both the small businesses and the residents, is there is that perception, So how do we give identity or rebranding or reimagining as to parts of this quarter, especially the area kind of north of 16th Street? There's been talk of naming a variety of different things, and how do you breathe that energy into that so that way people want to come there, because it doesn't necessarily have it has pieces, but it doesn't have that cohesive identity, and what does that look like? We did hear that as a desire through our outreach. So
that's a very helpful closing statement. So thank you very much, Jennifer and Andrew, both for being here and providing us with this great information. Thank you to the council for a good discussion here. I'm looking forward to continuing this discussion as we have many more opportunities for both resident, business, and council input coming up. So
exactly.
Thank you.
All right.
All right. Well, there being no further business in the work session, we'll be adjourned till 6:30.